I busuafo ade achesa na Jubilee TV GHN number bia ane na ba koma hema ne kente papa oton no mepacho na me na egu ase no fa na so kope na chire.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and good evening, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. If Professor Mills were here, he would have said, my brothers and sisters. I thank you for making time to join me tonight. Those who are here in person and the millions from across our beloved country and the world via the power of information and communication technology. Some of you may not know this, but I loved and studied history all the way to university level. And one of the books that absolutely enthralled me in my early years of studying history was a book titled Makers of Civilization. Those of you who are my generation will remember this book. In that book, you'll find many figures from the past, men and women, whose names have been written in letters of gold and who have been immortalized and remembered through the ages. Some of these celebrated historical icons were artists, physicians, engineers, philosophers, military figures, kings, pastors, who changed the world by boldly stepping out and challenging the status quo. Some of these celebrated historical icons broke the bounds in their various nations and were bold to change things. In the spirit of May Day and the celebration of workers, I say I equal to all of us for our continuous contribution to the success of this country and its development. Just like the past, there are many gallant workers of today whose stories would have regaled and inspired us if told. If there was ever any doubt, we know from our history that you are people who make our society and our nation what it is. We must join hands to ensure that we restore our nation on the path to prosperity and opportunity for all our people. We've always sung the first stanza of our national anthem, which asks for God's blessing on our homeland Ghana. And it enjoins us to resist oppressors' rule. Many have not taken the time to observe the second stanza of our national anthem, and the lyrics bear reflection. It says, "Hail to thy name, O Ghana. To thee we make our solemn vow, steadfast to build together a nation strong in unity, with our gifts of mind and strength of arm, whether night or day, in mist or storm, in every need, whatever the call may be, to serve thee, Ghana, now and forevermore." This stanza calls for a nation strong in unity and enjoins us with our gift of mind and strength of arm to serve our motherland, Ghana, now and forevermore. This is a call to service to our motherland, a call requiring that every one of us, regardless of background, religion, ethnicity, profession, political orientation, economic status, age, or gender, must unite while offering the gifts of our mind and the strength of our arm. Sitting on the fence is not an option in nation building. History will not remember us kindly if we accept the gradual degradation of our society and do not make any attempt to inspire ourselves to make a difference in our generation. Countrymen and women, Ghana, our dear nation, is at a crossroad, and we must tarry a while and reflect deeply on the road that we must take. The wrong choice would lead us down an easy path of chaos and destruction. The right choice will lead us up a path of prosperity and dignity, but go with hard work and sacrifice. My fellow Ghanaians, I can assure you that as our forebears did in the past, if we come together united as one, there's no task that is insurmountable. The future is bright if we rebuff those who seek to divide us for their personal gain. And if we open the opportunities of our country to all our citizens, irrespective of ethnicity, political affiliation, age, or gender. 30 years have passed since President John Rawlings, of blessed memory, appended his signature to the newly drafted Constitution of 1992, which made an irrevocable commitment to a return to democratic and constitutional governance. In the period preceding that moment, which set in motion what has turned out to be the most stable and enduring period of governance in our history, we had plunged from the heights of being the Black Star of Africa, from the lofty ambitions of the post-independence era, to the depths of economic catastrophe, institutional decay, corruption, and despondency. Our life as a nation had been checkered with multiple governance experiments alternating between civilian and military administrations. The several starts and stops led to a situation where by the 1980s, our circumstances were indeed intractable. After a decade of stabilization by the then PNDC regime, which involved confronting and overcoming such problems as economic recession, hyperinflation, prolonged droughts, devastating bushfires, shortage of basic commodities, among other serious socioeconomic problems, it became clear enough that the broad masses of the Ghanaian people yearned for a return to democratic governance. Thus began the process to fulfill their genuine aspirations through a participatory and inclusive approach. The product of that process is the 1992 Constitution. It ushered in the Fourth Republic and set us apart from our peers in the sub-region as having perhaps the most advanced democracy in West Africa, and I dare say one of the very best in Africa. The Constitution itself was a remarkable piece of work that contained elaborate provisions which captured and guaranteed the fundamental human rights of all Ghanaians, including those of free speech and association. It had extensive provisions on media freedom and offered directive principles of state policy around which governance was to be conducted. The Constitution also laid down a governance framework which emphasized checks and balances with the creation of independent state institutions with clear mandates to work towards the consolidation of democratic governance and the protection of people's rights. And best of all, it was a constitution drawn up by the mass of our people, including teachers, nurses, fishermen, farmers, security personnel, butchers, traders, hairdressers, through the process of a consultative assembly. With democratic governance fully restored, we surge forward together in the journey of nationhood with the hope and aspiration that the misfortunes of our past were well and truly behind us, and that the tentative steps we took then would ultimately deliver the progress we desired. 30 years after these events I've narrated, our country Ghana stands as a crossroad. Since the first elections were held under the Fourth Republic some 30 years ago, there have been 3 changes in government. Each of these changes has been heralded by expectations of better governance, leading to tangible improvements in the socio-economic conditions of our people. The NPP government came into office in January 2017 on the back of mouth-watering promises of almost instant transformation of our country. Amid countless slogans, President Akufo-Addo did promise to transform Ghana in 18 months, if voted for. Yes, he promised to turn around the fortunes of Ghana and create opportunities for all, and he charged all of us to be citizens and not spectators. A significant number of our citizens associated the promises with good and noble intentions. In return, and despite our best efforts, the Ghanaian people offered the NPP a clear mandate in 2017 to steer the affairs of our dear country. An assessment of our current conditions showed that what is happening now bears very little or no resemblance to what was promised. There's a sharp disparity between promise and practice. Today, most Ghanaians feel they were hoodwinked, and this is manifesting in their personal livelihoods and their daily struggles. Perhaps the most defining challenge of our time is making our economy work for everybody. Over the last several months, our political space and societal reaction has been dominated by discussions on the challenges with introducing even more taxes. These conversations have taken place against the backdrop of unparalleled cronyism, nepotism, and breaches of the basic tenets of conflict of interest, transparency, and accountable governance, and misplaced spending by the president and his inner circle. On top of these is the subjugation of independent constitutional bodies to the whims and caprices of the president and his cronies. The painful epiphany is that in Ghana today, the frustrations of Ghanaian people is at an all-time high. We're well and truly at a crossroad that is acutely complicated by the doubt and fear experienced by our next generations, that they face a future that carries no expectations of success in their lives. For most Ghanaians, the feeling of despondency and hopelessness is real and personal. It is exacerbated by a dangerous trend of growing inequality and lack of upward social and economic mobility, in addition to a calculated effort at constraining social justice. Interestingly, the condescending responses from government officials to public complaints have often accentuated the frustration and anger of the people. A government bereft of ideas has resorted to incarceration of critical voices, name-calling of citizens, and unfair categorization of the labor force and huge numbers of unemployed youth as lazy and undeserving. Worst of all, government has been using chaotic shouts and insincere technical analysis laden with dubious comparisons and outright untruths to manage the narrative. Another worrying trend is the bastardization of independent constitutional bodies, obfuscating their objectivity and introducing deliberate constraints on their ability to act independently and in accordance with the mandate bestowed on them by the Constitution. This deliberate strategy has resulted in heavily politically colored and conflicted persons assuming positions within such institutions, alongside the swift dismissal of persons who have dared to act in an independent and fair manner. And here one can mention the Domilovos of our time. The cumulative effect of these travesties is an unparalleled and lack of substantive accountability in the management of our national affairs. On the economic front, Nana Akufo-Addo and the MPP pledged to transform Ghana within 18 months, as I said, grow our economy at double digits, reduce borrowing, ensure fiscal discipline, bring down the cost of living, lower taxes, and protect the public purse. They promised also to move Ghana from taxation to production. In effect, none of this has been achieved. Instead, Ghanaians have been subjected to excruciating hardship and deprivation resulting directly from the mismanagement of the economy by a government that lacks the humility to accept responsibility and the capacity to appropriately diagnose the root causes of the challenges that have brought us here. Rather, they constantly seek to impose on us their version of the economic reality, denying that food prices have gone up, insisting that the business climate is very favorable, virulently protesting the evidence that their investments in meaningful capital expenditure is insignificant, and ignoring glaring evidence of unprecedented levels of corruption and breaches of internationally acclaimed standards of social justice. This government contests even the most basic and glaring set of facts. This should never have been the case for a government that has been fortunate to receive far more resources in the last 5 years than almost all governments before them under the Fourth Republic put together. Despite this fortune, today, the Ghanaian economy ranks amongst the worst managed in the world. It is characterized by unsustainable public debt due to an unprecedented fiscal deficit, comparatively high and still rising inflation, a rapidly depreciating currency, spiraling cost of doing business, ever-rising cost of living, high levels of corruption, abuse of civil and human liberties, and a general loss of investor confidence. Simply put, our country is on the verge of bankruptcy. In spite of the firm promise to reduce borrowing, this government has increased our public debt to almost 380 billion Ghana cedis as of the end of the first quarter of 2022. This is more than 3 times the debt of all governments since the days of Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah put together up to January 2017. A direct consequence of this astronomical borrowing is that our debt service obligations per annum has increased by 500%, from 10 billion Ghana cedis, which it was in 2016, to about 50 billion Ghana cedis now. We are at a great risk of defaulting on our debt repayments unless something drastic is done. To be clear, despite the heavy politicization of debt by the current administration while in opposition, the real problem we face is not just because of the daunting large size of the debt in terms of value. Rather, it is the stark reality that these huge levels of borrowing have not gone into infrastructure and capital investment, but have been applied largely to consumption and in some cases even misapplied. This heavy borrowing has not been met by commensurate and significant improvement in the size of our economy and its productivity to ease repayment of the debts in future. My brothers and sisters, an important and yet very disturbing variable, often ignored in our national discourse about the debt situation, is the corresponding ballooning of government's indebtedness to local businesses and other statutory bodies, including SOEs. These issues must occupy an important space within national discourse because our estimation is that government's liabilities to local businesses and other stakeholders exceed 30 billion Ghana cedis. Arising directly from the excessive borrowing to fund consumption-related expenditure is the harsh truth that more than half of what government collects in taxes is used to service debt, with the remainder going almost exclusively into public sector wages and salaries. This has created self-inflicted rigidities that leave very little space for investment in other important areas of the economy. The effect of this is that government is unable to meet its spending obligations in the most critical sectors of the economy, on which the livelihoods of millions of our people depend. It is little wonder, therefore, that out of a total annual collection of 2.1 billion under the National Health Insurance Levy as at end of 2021, only 127 million Ghana cedis, which is about 6% of the amount, had been released to the authority. This is stifling the ability of healthcare providers in the private and public sector to provide adequate care for the mass of our people. My brothers and sisters, in the hands of a more responsible and prudent administration, the resources that have been available to this administration should have resulted in quantum leaps in the standard of living of Ghanaians, and we should have recorded major progress as a nation. After inheriting a stable economy that was programmed and poised for rapid growth from early 2017, this government has squandered its way into a ditch from which it has become impossible to emerge without imposing even deeper hardship and suffering on the Ghanaian people. The minimum expectation was that the NPP government will build on the strong foundation that had been bequeathed them and achieve incremental progress over what they met. They have instead carried out a demolition exercise of that foundation and left our economy in quicksand, sinking at an alarming rate. However, now we know that responsibility and prudence are not concepts that appear to be appreciated by this government. As we speak, the cash crunch arising out of the rigidities in the economy is having a devastating toll on almost all sectors of our national life. Let's take the education sector, for instance. At the basic level, capitation grants have been in arrears for